want to really hear from you guys. So Jason and Dale, I'll hand it over to you guys. Give us a taste of Better Blokes 2021.
Thanks, Simon, and great to be part of Better Blokes this morning. I was looking forward to being with you all down in Canberra this weekend, but I guess I'll just have to, like the rest of us, wait for another year. So I think I'm going to share for a few minutes, and then Dale's going to cut in about 15 minutes. So I think, Simon, mate, I'm used to preaching for a long time, so you might need to get ready with that mute just to stop me. So Dale can cut in, but I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. But I wonder if I can just get a little show of hands here from all the blokes. Who here, I hope I'm not on my own, who here has ever gone on a fishing trip and caught nothing? Go on, just a little show of hands. Fishing trip, caught nothing. I love fishing, but I've had far too many of those fishing trips to count. You know, I've had times where I've got more mozzie bites on my legs than bites on my line. I've had nights where I've caught more seagulls than fish. I got a mate that I fish with every year and camp with on the beach, and every second year he throws his rod and reel into the surf and says, "That's it, I'm giving up on fishing. There's no more fish left in the sea." And so I've had far too many fishing trips to count where I've caught nothing. But I'd say one of my favourite stories about Jesus, and I'd say probably one of my most formative passages in Scripture, is when a bunch of ordinary blokes standing on a beach fished all night and caught nothing. It's in Luke chapter 5, and you see there these big crowds gathered around to listen to Jesus, and there's too many people. And so Jesus asked Simon, who's a fisherman, if he can get into his boat and speak to the people just a little bit out shore. And when he's finished speaking, he says to Simon, put the boat out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch. And Simon said, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything." This didn't make any sense to fishermen. This wasn't the time or the place to fish. And I reckon Simon's there looking at Jesus going, "Mate, you're a carpenter. You know, I'm a fisherman. You got no idea what you're talking about." It'd be a bit like me. This is a miracle that this is working on Zoom for me right now. I got no idea about technology. It'd be like me going to our IT guy in the office. Something goes wrong and saying, "Mate, why don't you just hit it or kick it?" You know, it's about all I know what to do to fix the computer. Or when my wife, who's a teacher, comes home from school and she's had a hard day with her class of kids, you know, I say to them, "Why don't you just hit them or kick them?" You know, again, I don't have any skills in that area to actually, you know, help people to be successful. And I reckon this is what's going on with Simon when Jesus comes along and he says, "Let down your nets for a catch." He's kind of rolling his eyes and he's saying, "We've worked hard all day, we've caught nothing, this is not the time to fish." But I love the next 8 words. And I reckon if, as blokes, we could live our lives by these next 8 words, the world would be a different place. Our nation would be a different place. He simply says, even though it doesn't really make rational sense to me, he says, "Because you say so, I will do it." Now, how different would this nation be if every bloke who followed Jesus lived every day by those words? "Because you say so, I'll do it." And you know the story. You know, when Simon did what Jesus said, they caught the mother load. They caught more fish than what they'd ever seen before. It actually says that they had to signal their partners in another boat to come and help them because they had too many fish. You know, put your hand up if you know what that signal is. I got no idea. You know, I've been fishing all my life and I've never caught that many fish. I do not know what that signal is. But these guys signaled their mates. After catching nothing all night, they caught more than ever before. You know, sometimes we've got to actually just put ourselves into these stories and just see Jesus is actually a good bloke to go fishing with. You know, he's like a human fish finder. I mean, this catch was simply not on Simon's radar. Jesus is a good bloke to go fishing with. Keep reading through the Jesus stories. Jesus is a good bloke to have at a party when the drinks run out. You know, Jesus is a good bloke to have in a boat when a storm comes up. Multiple options. He can stop the storm. He can walk on water. You know, Jesus is a good bloke to have around when you're hungry, when you're camping and you run out of food. You know, loaves and fishes just appear from nowhere. Jesus is a good bloke to have around when your mother-in-law's sick, if you like your mother-in-law and you want her to get healed. You know, Jesus is a good bloke to have around if you're in a fight. You know, ear falls off, just sticks it straight back on. See, I'm absolutely convinced that if Jesus was walking around our nation right now, most Aussie blokes would like him. They'd actually want to hang around with him. They'd actually, you know, think this is a good bloke to hang out with. He's a good bloke to go fishing with. But, you know, in this story, Jesus is not there to teach them any new fancy fishing principles, and nor, and this is really important, as this is where a lot of Aussie blokes just get the message of Jesus wrong. Nor was he there to teach them any new religious rules to follow. You know, Jesus just said to Simon and his couple of mates that were there with him, I love the next words. He just says, come follow me. Yeah, no other rules. Just follow me. No test to pass, just follow me. No fine print to read, just follow me. No list of do's and don'ts, just follow me. And I just keep coming back to this passage day after day, and I'm absolutely convinced Jesus just invites us to do the same thing today. And we make it far too complicated. We become religious all over again, and Jesus is simply just asking us to follow him. He's not inviting you to follow a list of rules. He's not asking you to pull your socks up and behave better. He's simply inviting all of us, ordinary blokes, just like, you know, Simon and James and John on the beach that day, to follow him and get to know him better. That's what Simon and his mates did. They pulled their boats up on shore, left everything and followed him. And, you know, three ordinary blokes standing on the beach simply said yes to Jesus, I'm going to follow you. Had no idea how life-changing that decision would be. But over the next 3 years, as we read the stories, they became Jesus' best mates. Again, we've made the Gospels too religious. They hung out together. They ate together. They helped people together. They helped their mates together. They healed people together. And they started the church together that's still impacting lives and the eternal destinies of people in every nation 2,000 years later. And, you know, later we know they died for the sake of Jesus and the message of good news. But right there, just standing on the beach as ordinary blokes that day, they were just simply invited to follow Jesus and get to know him more. And I'm absolutely convinced that's our invitation every day. And sometimes we forget that following Jesus is actually a friendship. First and foremost, it's a friendship. We're not invited to follow a list of rules. We're not invited to be religious. We're invited to follow a person. You know, his name's Jesus. He is a good bloke to go fishing with. And I think we see right throughout the gospel that he's actually much more interested in relationships than rules. Much more interested in relationships than rules. And it's really interesting to look at Simon's reaction when he sees the miracle power of Jesus, because I think it's similar to a lot of reaction in Aussie blokes today. You know, he says, go away from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man. When he actually starts to see that Jesus is much more than just a guy who, you know, teaches people on the beach, but there's something about God in him. He says, keep your distance, keep your distance. And that seems to be often our reaction. You know, I'm a sinner, so I've got to keep my distance from Jesus. But when we see what Jesus does, when Jesus sees sinners, he says, I actually want to come closer. I actually want to be near you. You know, I love the fact that I get in trouble for all sorts of things. But what I really want to get in trouble for is the same things that Jesus got in trouble for. And what we see Jesus getting in trouble for all the time is for welcoming sinners to his table and eating with them. Now, what if we just started getting in trouble for the same things that Jesus got in trouble for? You know, it just causes me great sadness. This is my, and I hear it in the heart of you, some of you blokes that I've met. I hear it in Steve's songs, and I just causes me sadness that most
okay.
Aussie blokes keep their distance from the church, the body of Christ. Because I reckon most Aussie blokes would actually like Jesus if they met him. You read the stories, irreligious people liked Jesus. Tradies liked Jesus. Even accountants and tax collectors liked Jesus. It didn't work out too good for the accountant, but it worked out pretty good for the tax collector. You know, fishermen liked Jesus. Nudists liked Jesus. I don't know if there's any nudists here at Better Blokes. I'm glad that everyone I can see on Zoom is wearing clothes this morning, but you know, I don't know if there's a whole bunch of nudists that are attracted to Better Blokes weekends. But the crazy guy, Luke 8, running around in the nude, no gear on, he liked Jesus. He just wanted to follow him wherever he went. You know, sick people like Jesus, prostitutes like Jesus, sinners like Simon liked Jesus. And I'm absolutely convinced most Aussie blokes would like Jesus if they met him. They just haven't been introduced to him very well yet. And that's where we come in. That's where, as ordinary blokes, you know, we get to follow in the footsteps of guys like Peter, James and John and just share what we've seen and what we know about Jesus. And none of us have seen it all. None of us know it all. None of us have got it all together. But if we'll just get in trouble for what Jesus gets in trouble for and welcoming sinners to our table and eating with them, you know, I reckon we got the opportunity to introduce blokes to Jesus who are far from him or feel far from him right now. That's why I've written the book. It's been in my heart. I'm a terrible writer. I failed English at school, but it took me 14 years to write one book. So I don't think I got too many more in me. But I just absolutely convinced Aussie blokes would like Jesus if they met him. So I've just tried to shine a light on Jesus in a uniquely Australian way. And if in some way it helps you introduce your mates to Jesus, then that's awesome. But I reckon we've got an opportunity to, in this season, to introduce our mates and our sons to Jesus. Jesus said to Simon, an ordinary sinner just like you and me, don't be afraid. From now on, you'll fish for men. You'll fish for blokes. You'll introduce blokes to Jesus. And, you know, we just got to keep this simple. Following Jesus is a friendship. We just say to him every day, because you say so, I'll do it. And followers of Jesus introduce their mates to Jesus. He's always called ordinary blokes like you and me to introduce other blokes to Jesus. There's some people with a unique call on their lives, like Steve, you know, traveling all over the nation, sharing the gospel. That's a unique call, and it's great to get behind his ministry, support his ministry. He's doing something that I don't see too many other people doing, and he's been doing it for the long haul. And so I take my hat off to you, mate. It's incredible what you're doing around the nation. And there aren't many of us that are ever going to do that. That is a unique call. But while we've got a mission that actually takes us around the world and around a nation, it actually starts just around our table. And so I just want to keep it really simple for us. You know, let's get in trouble for the same thing that Jesus got in trouble for. Let's invite people to sit around our table. Let's share our lives authentically with them. We do at Shed, and share food together, and to share our faith in Jesus, what we've seen and known about Jesus. I believe that right now there are more blokes open to Jesus than ever before. We're discovering that we're not as in control of our world as we thought we were, and we're not as indestructible as we thought we were. I bumped into Rob in the shops a few weeks ago because I had nowhere else to go. I was begging my wife, let me go to Woolies, let me go and buy something. Where else? I don't know if anyone else had that experience, but it was kind of like the highlight of my day was driving to Woolies to buy some food. And so I was at the shops more than ever. And so I bumped into Rob a couple of times, actually. I hadn't seen him for a few years. But I just remember I became friends with him about 5 years ago. I sat around a table with him. It was actually, he reminded me, it was in that shopping centre, in the food court. I bought him a coffee we sat around a table again, and I introduced him to Jesus. And it's changed his life. It's changed his family. I baptised him and his daughter. And he was just telling me he works on a building site, and he's telling me he'd been pretty quiet about his faith for 3 years. And he was just telling me that he got sick during Corona, not with Corona, but with something else, and just made him rethink his priorities, just started sharing his faith with the guys at work, and discovered there were 3 other guys on the building site that also were Christians, and none of them knew it because none of them had spoken up. But now they're getting to have conversations with the other guys at work, and he's now introducing others to Jesus. And I was just reminded, it's just simple. Sit around a table with people, share food, share your faith, share your life. You don't have to have it all together to be called by Jesus to transform the world, because he just transforms the world one life at a time and one day at a time. I'm really encouraged he chose Simon, because Simon's a buffet. I mean, have a look at him. He made lots of stupid mistakes through the Gospels. He lacked courage. He let Jesus down when he needed him the most. But Jesus says, I'm going to transform you. Changed his name to Peter and called him to change the world. And he's still calling ordinary buffheads like you and me to make lots of mistakes, keep following Jesus, and have a go at changing the world one life at a time. You know, I personally, I've found this just a season where I've actually gone back to this passage, and I've found this a very difficult season. I've found myself struggling with insecurity much more than I have for the last 10 years. As everything in my world changed overnight, like many of us sitting here on the screen. And I've just been walking. There's a spot I can walk to a boat ramp and the beach, not far from my place. I ride my bike there or I run there. And I've just made the decision every day, as I'm just struggling with insecurity and the call of God on my life in this season. I just simply walk along the water on the beach, and I imagine that Jesus is there with me, and he is. And I say, hey, what have I got to do to follow you today? I actually can't see what's going to happen next week. What have I got to do to follow you today? And get to the point where I say, because you say so, I'll do it. Just want to encourage all you blokes. That'll do. I think my time's up on the Dale. But I just want to encourage all you blokes. He's still calling ordinary blokes like you and me to change the world one life at a time, one day at a time. Keep it simple. Get in trouble for what Jesus got in trouble for. Welcome sinners to your table. Eat with them. Share your life. Share your faith. And see what he does. Maybe you'll transform the world one life at a time.
Awesome, Jason. Thanks so much for sharing, mate. I think we've all been blessed by that. Can you hear me now, Simon? That all good?